everybody, and I know it's a tough ask after the keynote speaker, so I'll start with a bit of humour. I'm here from the government and I'm here to help. This afternoon I'm just going to cover very quickly, because we do have to shoot just after 4 to catch a plane, talk a bit about the background of phytosanitary certification and what's required for markets, importing country requirements, and then finish off with some in-transit cold treatment discussion, which we're a little bit familiar with having done quite a lot of citrus. So, some background. I have got some notes that Pear has with all of these web links on it. We have quite a comprehensive website, so I appreciate that sometimes it's a little bit difficult to navigate through for those of you who've been there. But the key thing is, if you look in the plants and plant products section, there is a step-by-step guide to exporters for those who are new. You do get access to our industry advice notices, which talk about changes in the market, new registrations and the like coming up for various markets. Access to our service charter, information on fees and charges, and importantly, this link here to become a stakeholder, so to register as a stakeholder to get direct email feed or RSS feed if you tee up for that on our industry advice notices, so you do know what's going on. Microplants, is anybody familiar with microplants? The meaning of importing country requirements? Fantastic to see a bit of a show of hands there, that's really good. Microplants has all of our known importing country requirements, and that covers grains, seeds, and fruit and veggies, obviously, nursery stock and a whole lot of things. But that information has what we know to be importing country requirements, so you can go and search for Azerbaijan apples and it'll bring it up. If we have a set of conditions, it'll bring it up. It also has a link to the protocols and work plans where they exist. That is actually a section you require a log on, so there's a link there to go and register and access to those. So what's our role? Our role is to enable trade through the provision of certification, essentially endorsing your product compliance with the importing country requirements. If it says got to have blue ribbons tied on every second stem, at an inspection we're looking to see the blue ribbons tied on every stem. That's what goes in the phytosanitary section. We're obviously covered by the legislative requirements, and a key thing for you guys to understand is that fruit and vegetables, all fruit and vegetables are prescribed goods, and therefore come under the Act when they're exported. There's a requirement on exporters to present compliant goods for export inspection. That's our inspection. And then once we're satisfied that all the requirements are met, and that's either by inspection or audit or a combination of the two, we can certify the goods. And importantly, they must be prepared in a registered establishment. So in some cases that may simply be inspection. In other cases it may be that if you're treating it onshore, it has to be treated in a registered establishment and handled thereafter. And there are particular requirements for us for those establishments. I'm sure some of you are familiar. Importing country requirements. Why? Obviously importing countries, much like Australia, want to protect their quarantine and phytosanitary status, so they set particular rules about the importation of particular commodities, which may be hosts for pests, or they have a regulation on pests and diseases. So it can be either regulated, it can be distributed either through the World Trade Organisation, the Sanitary and Phytosanitary Committee process, so we just get a notification. India has now imposed restrictions on a particular pest or a particular commodity, or on a government-to-government basis. And who's registered for Thailand this year? In Thailand registrations, obviously for those who are involved in Thailand, you may be familiar that we have agreed with Thailand a whole range of protocols. 5 years ago they changed their rules on quarantine requirements for importation. And we've developed a whole series of protocols. I think there are 9 now for Thailand, all subtly different, covering individual products. Citrus, apples, pears, persimmons, avocados, you know. But those agreements in our case are particular to Australia. Obviously the key role in this is to mitigate the phytosanitary risk to the importing country. Much as we impose conditions on others, they impose them on us to mitigate the risk to them. And of course in our circumstance, they must be met to trade. Our job as the regulator is to make sure that you guys, your product has met the requirements, it's free of pest and disease, and therefore fair trade. If it's not, then we have challenges that Tony was talking about before, not just challenges on the phytosanitary side, but on the residue side. It can include in-field quarantine as well as food safety requirements. In-field quarantine might be something as simple as pest and disease monitoring, and for the Thailand guys, you'll know that one of the commitments you make when you sign up for Thailand is that you're going to follow the Air Australia Integrated Pest Management Program. And the reason for that is there are a number of prescribed quarantine pests in the Thailand protocol that we have to be satisfied you guys are monitoring for and controlling, and the way we do that is by looking at saying if you follow the API here, that covers all those pests and diseases and you be compliant. We don't obviously have a regime for audit for Thailand. We think it unnecessary at this stage, but given some recent experience in a couple of other commodities where we have audited for other countries, we're conscious that when we don't have an audit policy, some people aren't compliant. They're saying, hey, I'm not getting audited, don't need to worry about it. We do need to worry about it because we have agreed, and part of our regulation process is that we're confirming you have undertaken those controls or monitoring and controls in the field. Food safety requirements. We don't deal with food safety. In fact, we have a bit of a challenge that food safety for horticultural products is essentially left to the commercial industry. Notwithstanding, in some cases they are written into the protocols. China cherries is one that springs to mind. It actually does talk about cherries must meet Chinese food safety requirements. Who can tell me what the food safety requirements are for China? Well, I certainly can't. If you can trawl through the Chinese websites, you can find out. But it's a challenge to find out exactly what's required. As Tony was saying, food safety can be simply as easy as making sure that the product's monitored for residue limits and you follow it. And we do have challenges, particularly in Japan, where they do test a set percentage of Australian product on arrival. If individual exporters or then the broader industry, the sector, so in this case citrus, or it could be table grapes, is found to be non-compliant, they ramp it up to 10, now I think 30% inspection regimes. It's meant to test the 30%. We test the whole lot. And in some cases they won't release it until they have the test results back. So it's the whole on us collectively to make sure that we are meeting those requirements. It does have obviously a commercial cost as well. Products sitting on the wharf, you're paying demurrage while waiting for it to get tested and released. So one small mistake can cock up for the rest of us. There's probably enough on MRLs, but I think it is important, and whilst we don't regulate it, to really be thinking about those issues. And Hong Kong now has MRLs that don't have regulation on quarantine issues, but they do have maximum residue limits. So send to the markets, please make sure you find out. We do have a particular number of protocols that have post-harvest requirements. That can include segregation, so if you're growing fruit specifically for China, then you keep it segregated from all other fruit. Now that creates logistical challenges. There are also requirements for inspection, and that is not just looking at fruit to say, yeah, it's okay, but actually specifically looking for quarantine pests. Requirements for labelling, requirements to have documented SOPs that, enable us to be satisfied that there are processes in place to meet the requirements. Packaging and labelling. The big one for packaging obviously is clean packaging, fruit, pest and disease, ISBN 15 pellets. Everybody familiar with ISBN 15? Methyl bromide for wooden pellets. Not always prescribed, but in most cases it is. Not too much else on packaging. Labelling is a biggie. I'm going to put my notes here. Labelling, we had a case in Japan this year with citrus. Packhouse put to Japan, the requirement is for Japan. Japan said, no, I'm not going to accept it. We had to write a letter. It took 12 days, paying demurrage, fruit sitting on the wharf, not knowing what's happening. 12 days to convince Japan that it had actually been packed for Japan, even though the label said to Japan. And they let it go. Unfortunately, 2 weeks later, we had another one, very similar issue, where the labelling still had, actually this time had for Japan, but it had the lot number of the exporter's name between the 4 and Japan. Japan said, not compliant. And the problem last week, guys, we haven't sorted it out now. What's going on? We're not going to accept it, and the whole container was rejected. 40 grand shipped to somewhere else. That is how picky some of these countries are. Our work plans and our protocols do have where it's required, what the specific wording is, what other pieces of information you want to have. Australia, the state, packet number, those sort of things on the label or the colour count. In the case of China, it also has the Chinese version. So, what's our role in all of this? Is to make sure that you get the requirements. We talked about Thailand. We do a range of audits with just 130 odd growers for table grapes across the country. We've done something like 70 cherry growers and 30 pack houses. And in February we're looking forward to doing citrus, about 250 growers and 50 pack houses. So, big audit regime. We're trying to work on building a compliance and understanding of compliance there so we can mitigate that. But we are going out and looking at all these things. Do you have a crop monitoring record? Was it done fortnightly, for example? Have you reached the threshold for common moth, light brown apple moth? Have you taken the appropriate controls? They're the things that we have to make sure the industry is doing. Obviously, the same for pack houses. And obviously, the key thing for us is the product inspection. So, getting your product at inspection is and having a look at it. Now, our sampling regime is obviously we're picking a random sample. So if you've only labelled half the boxes and our sample happens to identify that half of them are labelled, or that those ones are labelled, you'll get a pass. If there are other boxes that aren't labelled that we haven't picked up, our sample is only a random sample to give us the greatest surety that we have done. What we don't accept, obviously, is we are the final decision maker for your product. I go back to the previous slide, presenting export compliant products so that we essentially can verify it, give it a phyto set, which is really just a passport for fruit and vegetable. Follow-up audits and non-compliance, obviously where that happens, we do a follow-up where there's non-compliance, and that can be a combination of generic non-compliance that we look across the industry and say, you think we've got to do some follow-up here, or we get feedback from importing countries, and we do like Japan labelling, we get that, but we also get a whole lot of at the end of the citrus season from Japan saying, here's all the non-conformities for the last season, big stack, 50 containers that were fumigated for pests and the like. So we do get that feedback, and we do wherever possible try and get it back to the industry. And the last thing we do is we establish a list of compliant entities, and some of those we keep ourselves. I think in the case of Thailand, we don't actually send it to Thailand for growers and packers, but for other countries we do have to send the list. It has to be up on their website before they'll allow the product in. For Thailand, for anyone contemplating doing onshore cold treatment, don't. Just go through that process at the moment, and they want everything before they will approve, before they can have pests that are out there. They want to know what sort of refrigeration gear you've got, what construction of your room is, what sort of probes you've got, when you've done tests on short treatment, all that sort of information. Now, I'm not saying don't do it if you do want to, but it's quite a long, laborious process. But that's the sort of detail some of these importing countries are looking for. So our job, present a list and say, these people can go. And obviously when it comes to inspection, we're verifying. So, what are the industry responsibilities? Well, they can vary. As I said, in the case of Thailand, it is integrated pest monitoring and good agricultural practice. What's good agricultural practice? Anybody? 10 different ideas? How many people in the room? 30 different ideas what good agricultural practice is. We don't prescribe that sort of detail either. We're often, or in most cases, we rely on the industry body. We have the APAL RPM manual, and that's the basis on which we expect you guys to act to meet the requirements. But in most cases, the minimum is monitoring and control of quarantine pests. Obviously, that's what it's all about. In pack houses, often the requirement to have, as I said, documented standard operating procedures. How do you undertake packing? What's the grading process? How do you do inspection? And importantly for us, what we're looking for is you guys to make sure in your pack houses that when you do your inspection, you actually record the result. Yep, it's pretty suitable for Thailand or for China, whichever the market is. And the last one, product security there is obviously very important as well. Key thing, the last line there is the export listing coordination done through Apple and Pear. We've increasingly moved to industry bodies doing it. Pear's done a great job of coordinating all that this year. A few challenges for all this first up, but it is a big job to look at, go through all the paperwork to establish compliance. So we just simply don't have the resources for that. So we are relying on key bodies, and that's my opinion. All right, in-transit cold treatment. This was really the guts of the topic today, was in-transit cold. We had a presentation last week on post-citrus season follow-up. We had a discussion with 9 shipping lines. So we've gone from about 3 or 4 who can do it. We're going to have 9 interested, which is great for you guys. The more involved, hopefully we get the cost down. But the key thing for us is it's a partnership between exporters, ourselves, shipping line, and importantly, the people actually doing the labour. And getting that right is really fundamental. There's no room for error. And the key things about it are pre-call it, load it quickly, and check the temperatures. Pre-calling is absolutely fundamental. There's some discussions about cooling earlier. Our experience, certainly my experience, I looked at data for every container, not by everyone. Most of the containers of citrus to Japan over the last 3 years, a couple of thousand containers. And what we see is where the fruit's cold, when it's loaded, it stays cold. Very little variation in the temperatures and in the transit, which gives us the greatest chance of success. The fruit's not cold, it just does not get. There's some great data out of the USDA that tells us that the load in a container basically is conductive cooling. So if you've got a variation from 5 degrees to 1 degree, you're going to end up somewhere around 3 degrees as your starting point across the load. Now that's not a compliant temperature if you've got to travel below 2 degrees. And importantly for some markets, completing before arrival. Japan, I think the USA. So you can't finish the treatment once it arrives. You have to, in some cases, finish the treatment before it's unloaded from the vessel. 3 containers this year, the 5 failures we had with citrus to Japan, 3 of them were, they came off the vessel literally hours before the treatment was due to finish, got rejected and sent back.
Just a question, what about probes, temperature probes? Because I know we used to end up using stocking nets, we used to use plastic bags.
Good point actually, Tony. One of the key things we have, and I think it's in the latest slide, is making sure the fruit's secure on the probe. Falling out. We've had a case in Thailand, probably everyone's heard about it, but it seems to be repeated around the industry, of a grape falling off the end of the sensor. So there's still 3 grapes, but Thailand's very specific, it must be on the end of the sensor. Whether it fell out when they pulled the probe out of the box, who knows. No fruit on the end, fine. And it is really important that detail is, that attention to detail for cold chain is really important. Apples and pears, a whole lot easier. You've got one piece of fruit, much easier to do, but it is really important to get that right. We had a case a few weeks ago, some apples into Thailand, I think the first shipment. The data was incomplete, and the Thai said, no, we're not going to accept it in. That's what I'm talking about, and it took a lot of work from our guys in Bangkok to convince them. But we just don't have the capital all the time to go back and do that all the time. In the case of Japan, they're not compliant, not interested, gets rejected is their approach. So what are we going to do? What do we expect from carriers? That they check that the probes are calibrated and accurate. When they come to us, they've got to calibrate. First, they've got to be consistent calibration, and they've got to be within 0.3 of the degree. Check that the GMT clock is set correctly. This problem for Japan, it's less critical for other markets, but it's one of those things, if you're doing it anyway, just make sure the GMT clock is set. Then when we have a debate about when it started and when it finished, we're all on the same time frame. Pre-trip inspection, obviously containers do get pre-trip before they go. If you're doing it in transit, you're going to pay a premium. Make sure the shipping line puts a new battery in and it's charged. If someone put new batteries in, the container then sits in the yard for 4 months off power, the battery goes flat, so make sure it's charged when there is a new battery. Costs them, I think, $30 Henry, did we find out? So it's 3% of that premium you're going to pay, but the new battery is the bit that's going to give you the data constantly for every hour of the whole duration. For some markets, it's important that the container is listed on the USDA website. In the case of Japan, we actually send the list to them. They can't look it up on the website, apparently. But it does need to be listed in the USDA in some cases. So if that's the requirement of the work plan, make sure your carrier is checked that. And the last one, it's got to have fruit fly mesh or security fitted, so over the vents and drain holes in the bottom so that fruit fly can get it. Sounds stupid, I know, in some cases it is, but for the sake of a little 50 cents worth of plastic mesh over the drain, it doesn't create a hassle at the other end. Okay, load out preparation. The key thing for whoever's doing the loading out, making sure the container's suitable, your battery, pre-trip, so on. Pre-cooling the fruit below carriage temperature. I can't reiterate this enough, guys. In our experience and as the commercial guys that we work with, where the fruit is cold, and when I say cold, I mean properly cold in a pre-cooler, and that's not just walking around the outside, sticking your probe and saying, yeah, the fruit on the outside of the pellet's 1 degree, it's okay. Making sure you know what the rest of the pellet's like. It's no good having the middle of the pellet 6 degrees, saying, yeah, it's all okay on the outside, because that's not what will achieve success. Try to make sure the fruit's cold. Load it as quickly as you can. The complaint we get, of course, is it's too expensive for us to stand there and supervise it, but some guys take 2 hours to load a container, other guys can do it in 20 minutes. Loading it quickly keeps it cold. Train staff to place the probes, and that's not just where does the probe go, because they're all different. I don't apologise for that. That's various countries specify various things, and literally some of them are half a pallet different, so we have to make sure our guys, when we're supervising, know exactly which market it is, which is why telling us in the RFP where it's going is important. They're all a little bit different, but it's not, we supervise the positioning, make sure it's in the right place, but it's up to you guys, make sure the fruit's secure on the probe, got enough slack in the cable so that if it does get pulled, it's not going to pull the probe out of the fruit, take it secure in the box, all those sort of things. Once it's loaded, keep it on power obviously, keep it cold. Ask the shipping line to check that the recorder's working. Check it before it moves to the yard. But importantly, ask them to check it when it gets to the yard. Once it's at the port, make sure it is. They have got it on power. They check that the recorder's working properly, all the probes are reading. Nothing worse than thinking, God, if I only got them to check it before it went on the vessel, I could have recalibrated it, replaced the probe, done whatever. And we do have that. We've saved probably 10 containers this year going to Japan. Have them recalibrated before they were on the vessel. Otherwise, we've got to Japan, data's incomplete. A couple of photos there. Tony will recognise the brand. I won't dwell on those because we've got a shorter time. What's our role? Obviously, inspect the fruit, check that it's pre-cooled. To calibrate the container, so we do a calibration where necessary, we're recording on a calibration record. And we supervise the probe placement. Check the temperature once it's placed, where necessary, record the start time of the treatment and the seal number and create that calibration record. And once we start, our documentation hub, once it's all set to go, will give you obviously the calibration record where necessary in the photo circuit. And as I said, give a carrier to check that it's working. Give them a copy of the calibration record that says, yep, we loaded it at 01:30 GMT on the 21st of November. Is their data from 01:30 on the 21st. Make sure they're ready side of the day. Get them to monitor the ongoing recording. Some of them now, some of the newer containers, real-time data, they can monitor it, sitting in the office in Sydney, tell you exactly what's happening. The cherry guys are going to put 300 grams worth of fruit in a 40-footer. They really want to know every hour what's happening to their fruit. They can play with the set point, do all those things to keep it within step. Get them to check that the data set's complete before they present the data to the on-arrival inspectors, and obviously then present the data when it arrives, making sure it's complete. What goes pear-shaped? Put that in there. And what goes wrong? Hopefully not that. As we said, arrival before completion. Data gaps, that was exactly what happened in Thailand the other week. It had 3 or 4 data gaps, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. If we were looking at that, we'd just say it had to be every hour, 20 days, 16 days, whatever it is, it's not compliant. And the expectation from our training partners is exactly the same thing. If it's 16 days, don't turn up with 15 days and 23 hours, make sure that it's 16 days. Temperature spike. You get 2 sort of spikes. One is obviously the fruit actually getting warm, so going above the schedule. Occasionally you do just get a spike where the probe's quite clearly just gone out of whack for some reason. The importing country generally will recalibrate the probes, make sure they're happy it's still set to 0 and discount it. But you do have to be careful. The documents, obviously the documents have got to be right. We do have the odd recorder or probe failure, pretty rare. 450 containers of citrus this year, 1 recorder failure. I don't think it actually worked right from the start. Fruit falling off the probes. Took that table grape one, I think that's the only one I'm aware of. And any citrus through there, I don't think so. It is
sometimes they use plastic bags and that stuff's right up. Yeah. Sometimes you'll get a spike as well going over the equator. So your shipping line has to be pretty smart and switched on Good on that.
And we just looked at some data with some guys from some fruit to China the other day, and we can see that little rise in the middle. We've actually got a problem with placement of one of the probes that keeps putting it out of whack, so we're working on that. But the shipping lines generally won't share the data, even though it's your fruit. They're very particular about keeping their data to themselves. But I must admit, having shipped thousands of containers around the world, I've been very impressed with what I've seen in Japan data, actually how consistent it is. It's really good. And the last one, doesn't say for Japan, 12 days negotiation, 3 letters, demurrage the whole lot, all because we put to Japan rather than for Japan. I think that typifies how important it is to get this absolutely right. I know that's very quick, and I do apologise. I have to get out the door in a couple of minutes, but happy to take a couple of questions. I have got some notes. I know they're pretty